My name's Edward Griffin. I'd been looking forward to trying this new Italian place, Marco's, ever since it opened. The reviews were mixed. Some raved, some weren't impressed. I figured I'd see for myself. I know Italian food. I spent a good chunk of my life cooking it, after all. So I went last Tuesday, early evening. The place was surprisingly busy for a weeknight. I ordered the osso buco. It arrived looking, well, let's just say it wasn't what I expected. The gremolata was far too heavy on the parsley, practically drowning out the other flavors. Now, I'm not one to complain, but this was a simple fix. A rookie mistake, really. So when the young chef Marco himself came swaggering through the dining room, I figured I'd offer a little friendly advice. "Excuse me, chef," I said, keeping my voice low. "The osso buco is quite good, but the gremolata could use a lighter hand with the parsley. It overpowers the citrus and garlic." He stopped, looked me up and down like I was something stuck to his shoe. Then he actually chuckled. "With all due respect, sir," he said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Times have changed. What you might have considered good cooking back in the day," he paused for dramatic effect. "Well, let's just say things are different now. You probably don't know much about cooking anymore." I could feel my face flush. The whole room seemed to go quiet. People were staring. I just mumbled something about enjoying the rest of my meal and turned back to my plate. The osso buco, which had been perfectly acceptable a moment ago, now tasted like sawdust. I forced myself to eat a few more bites, paid the bill, and left. As I walked home, the cool evening air did little to cool the burning in my chest. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something deeper. This wasn't just some punk kid being rude. This was a dismissal. A complete disregard for everything I'd dedicated my life to. Years of training, the endless hours in hot kitchens, the sacrifices, the constant striving for perfection, all brushed aside with a wave of his hand. "You probably don't know much about cooking anymore," the words echoed in my head. He had no idea at all. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept replaying the scene in my head. Marco's smug face, the condescending tone of his voice. "You probably don't know much about cooking anymore." The arrogance of it. He thought he knew. He thought he was at the top of his game. He had no clue. He had no clue what it took to truly master the culinary arts. He'd never felt the heat of 1,000 Sunday brunches, the pressure of a full dining room on a Saturday night. He'd never known the bone-deep exhaustion after a 16-hour shift, the constant battle against burns and cuts, the relentless pursuit of the perfect balance of flavors. My mind drifted back to my early days in the kitchen. Just a kid, really, peeling potatoes and scrubbing pots. The head chef, a gruff old Italian named Sal, barely acknowledged my existence for the first 6 months. But I watched. I learned. I absorbed everything like a sponge. I worked my way up, slowly but surely, from prep cook to line cook to sous chef. Each step a hard-won victory. I learned the secrets of sauces, the magic of perfectly cooked pasta, the art of transforming simple ingredients into culinary masterpieces. Then came Paris, the city of lights, the culinary capital of the world. I landed a job at a small but ambitious bistro. The hours were brutal, the competition fierce. But I thrived. I poured my heart and soul into every dish, pushing myself to the limits of my abilities. And slowly, painstakingly, I began to build a reputation. Food critics started to notice. My name began to appear in magazines and newspapers. The bistro became a hotspot. And then, the pinnacle. The Michelin star. The culmination of years of dedication, passion, and unwavering commitment. That star wasn't just a symbol of achievement, it was a validation, a recognition of the sacrifices I'd made. The missed birthdays, the holidays spent in the kitchen, the time away from family and friends. It was a testament to the countless hours I'd spent honing my craft, pushing myself to be better, to be the best. And now this boy, this Marco, dared to dismiss all of that, dared to suggest that I didn't know much about cooking anymore. The thought was almost laughable. He was playing with ingredients I had lived and breathed them. He was following trends, I had helped create them. He was a flash in the pan, I was a seasoned veteran. The more I thought about it, the more absurd it became. He was a pretender, a charlatan, masquerading as a chef. He didn't deserve the title, and he certainly didn't deserve to insult someone who had earned it and worn it with pride for decades. The next morning, I went through the motions of my usual routine. Coffee on the porch, a quick scan of the newspaper, then out to my herb garden. Usually this was my sanctuary, the smell of rosemary and thyme, the feel of the soil in my hands, the quiet hum of the bees. It was all so grounding, so peaceful. But this morning, it felt different, empty, somehow. Marco's words, like a persistent weed, had taken root in my mind, choking out the serenity. I went through the motions, pruning a basil plant here, pinching off a dead leaf there. But my heart wasn't in it. The joy I usually found in tending my herbs had vanished. Even the vibrant green of the leaves seemed dull, lifeless. It was as if Marco's dismissive words had tainted everything, casting a shadow over my passion. Later, I tried to lose myself in cooking. I'd been experimenting with a new risotto recipe, something with roasted butternut squash and sage. I pulled out my well-worn cookbook, the pages stained with years of use, and started gathering the ingredients. But as I stood at the counter, chopping onions and garlic, the familiar rhythm of the knife against the cutting board felt mechanical. The usual anticipation, the excitement of creating something delicious, just wasn't there. I glanced at the hook on the wall where my old chef's apron hung. It was stark white, thick cotton canvas, softened with age and countless washings. It had been a gift from Sal, my mentor, back when I'd finally earned the title of sous chef. I'd worn it with pride for years, a badge of honor, a symbol of my dedication to the culinary arts. I'd even worn it during the Michelin ceremony, a silent tribute to the man who had taught me so much. But now, as I looked at it, it felt different, small, insignificant, almost childish. Marco's words echoed in my mind. You probably don't know much about cooking anymore. Had I been clinging to a fantasy? Was my past glory just that past? Was this apron, once a symbol of my accomplishments, now just a meaningless relic? A reminder of a bygone era, a time when I was relevant, when I mattered. I reached out and touched the fabric, tracing the faded outline of the restaurant's logo. It felt rough beneath my fingertips, like sandpaper against my soul. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure the feeling of pride I'd always felt when I wore it. But all I could feel was a dull ache in my chest, a sense of emptiness, a hollowness that seemed to spread through my entire being. I turned away, unable to bear the sight of it any longer. The apron, once a source of comfort and inspiration, now felt like a weight, a burden, a constant reminder of the insult I had suffered. The hollowness didn't last. It curdled, slowly, like milk left out in the sun, transforming into something thicker, more potent. Anger. A slow, simmering rage. I wasn't some doddering old fool who'd lost his touch. I was Edward Griffin. I'd earned my stripes. I'd paid my dues. I'd poured my heart and soul into every dish, every sauce, every perfectly cooked piece of pasta. I'd bled for this profession. And this arrogant little upstart, this Marco, had the audacity to dismiss me, to diminish everything I'd accomplished, everything I'd become. I wouldn't stand for it. I wouldn't let him get away with it. He'd humiliated me in front of a room full of strangers. He'd trampled on my legacy, on my life's work. He'd made me question my own worth, my own identity. And for what? To inflate his own ego? To prove some point to himself and his patrons? No, absolutely not. The thought of letting it go, of simply accepting the insult and moving on, was unbearable. It was like swallowing a mouthful of bile. It stuck in my throat, a bitter, acrid taste that refused to go away. I paced the kitchen, my hands clenched into fists. I needed to do something. I needed to retaliate. I needed to remind him, and the world, exactly who I was. I was Edward Griffin, a Michelin-starred chef. And I wasn't going to let some punk kid with an overinflated ego and a mediocre granola tarnish my reputation. The idea at first was a vague, undefined urge, a desire to strike back, to even the score. But as I paced, the urge began to solidify, to take shape. It started as a flicker, a small ember glowing in the darkness of my anger. Then, slowly, steadily, it began to grow, fueled by the memory of Marco's smug face, the condescending tone of his voice, the sheer arrogance of his dismissal. I needed a plan, a strategy, something that would not only avenge the insult, but also expose Marco for the fraud he was. I knew, deep down, that he wasn't the culinary genius he pretended to be. There was something off about his food, a lack of depth, a certain hollowness, like a beautifully painted shell with nothing inside. I just needed to find a way to prove it, to expose the cracks in his facade, to reveal the emptiness beneath the surface. The ember in my mind continued to glow, growing brighter, hotter. A plan began to form, slowly, tentatively, like a delicate soufflé rising in the oven. It would take time, patience, and precision. But I had all three. I'd spent my entire life honing those skills, and now I would use them to exact my revenge. I would dismantle Marco's carefully constructed empire, brick by brick. I would expose his mediocrity, his arrogance, his deceit, and I would do it with the same meticulous care and unwavering dedication that had earned me a Michelin star. He had no idea what he was up against. He had no idea who he was dealing with. He thought he knew everything. He thought he was at the top of his game. He was about to learn a very valuable lesson. He was about to learn that you don't mess with Edward Griffin. My first step was information. I needed to know everything about Marco. Who was he? Where did he come from? What were his ambitions? I started with the obvious, the internet. Marco's restaurant had a website, of course, full of glossy photos of pasta dishes and glowing testimonials. Marco himself was featured prominently, a beaming smile plastered across his face. The About Us section was predictably vague, filled with flowery language about authentic Italian cuisine and family recipes passed down through generations. Nothing concrete. Nothing I could use. I dug deeper. Social media. Marco had a presence on everything. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. He posted constantly. Photos of himself with celebrities, shots of elaborate dishes, endless pronouncements about the quote he was leading. It was all so performative, so superficial. It reeked of insecurity, of a desperate need for validation. And then, I found it. Buried amidst the endless stream of self-promotion, a post about an upcoming competition, the Golden Ladle Awards, Best New Restaurant category. Marco was obsessed. He'd posted about it multiple times, practically drooling over the prospect of winning. This was it. This was my angle. This was the first ingredient in my recipe for revenge. The Golden Ladle Awards were a big deal. A win could catapult a restaurant to the next level, bringing in a flood of new customers and media attention. I knew Marco saw this as his ticket to the big time, his chance to solidify his reputation, to prove himself as a force to be reckoned with in the culinary world. And that, I realized, was his weakness, his ambition, his desperate need for recognition. He wanted that award so badly, he could taste it. And I was going to make sure he never got it. I spent the next few days immersed in research. I learned everything I could about the Golden Ladle Awards. The judges, the criteria, the past winners. I studied Marco's menu, analyzing each dish, looking for weaknesses, for inconsistencies. I scoured online reviews, looking for patterns, for clues. I even ordered takeout from Marco's a few times, forcing myself to eat his mediocre food, dissecting each bite, trying to understand his methods, his techniques. It was like studying a rival chef, a competitor. And, in a way, that's exactly what he was. He was a threat to my legacy, to my reputation. And I was going to take him down. The more I learned, the more confident I became. Marco was all style and no substance. He was a master of self-promotion, a culinary illusionist, creating a facade of authenticity while cutting corners at every turn. He talked a big game, but his food couldn't back it up. He was a fraud. And I was going to see him. The Golden Ladle Awards were just a few weeks away. Time was of the essence. I had a lot of work to do. I needed to gather more information, to refine my plan, to assemble my team. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about upholding the integrity of my profession. It was about reminding the world that true culinary excellence couldn't be faked. It couldn't be bought. It had to be earned. And Marco hadn't earned it. He'd stolen it. He'd taken shortcuts, cut corners, and built his reputation on a foundation of lies. And I was going to make him pay. The Golden Ladle Awards would be his downfall. It would be the stage for his public humiliation. And I, Edward Griffin, would be the conductor of his demise. The internet was a good starting point, but it only scratched the surface. I needed inside information. I needed to tap into my network. I'd spent decades in the culinary world, building relationships, making connections. It was time to call in some favors. My first call was to Antoine, my old sous chef from Paris. He'd gone on to open his own catering business, a very successful one, I might add. Antoine had always been a sharp guy, with a keen eye for detail and an ear for gossip. "Antoine, my friend," I said, after the initial pleasantries, "I need a favor. I'm looking into a young chef, Marco Rossi, runs a place called Marco's. Heard anything about him?" Antoine didn't disappoint. "Marco Rossi?" he mused. "Ah, yes. The young pretender. Lots of buzz, but not much substance. Heard he cuts corners. Uses pre-prepared ingredients, passes them off as homemade. Clever marketing, but the discerning palate can tell." He paused. "Why do you ask, Henri?" I downplayed my interest, feigning casual curiosity. "Just curious," I said. "Heard some whispers. Wanted to see if there was any truth to them." Antoine, bless his gossipy heart, continued. "Oh, there's truth, all right. Heard he's got a supplier, some shady outfit out of state. Delivers pre-made sauces, pasta, even desserts. Marco just heats them up, adds a sprinkle of parsley, and voila! Authentic Italian cuisine." He chuckled. "Fool's gold, my friend. Fool's gold." My next call was to Genevieve, a respected food critic I'd known for years. Genevieve had a reputation for being brutally honest, which was exactly what I needed. "Genevieve, darling," I began, "I'm doing a little research on a new restaurant, Marco's. You've been there, haven't you? What did you think?" "Overrated," she said, without hesitation. "Technically proficient, but lacking soul. The flavors are flat. No depth. Like he's following a recipe, but not understanding the heart of the dish. And the service? Amateur hour. The waitstaff is clueless. The kitchen is disorganized. The whole place is a house of cards waiting to collapse." I pressed her for more details. "Anything specific?" I asked. "Any weaknesses you noticed?" "The sous chef," she replied. "Young woman, talented but clearly frustrated. Stuck under Marco's thumb. She's the only one in that kitchen who seems to care about the food. The rest of the staff is just going through the motions." Over the next few days, I continued to work my network. I spoke to former colleagues, suppliers, even a few disgruntled former employees of Marco's. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle, painting a clearer picture of Marco's operation. He was a charlatan, a con artist, building his empire on a foundation of lies and deception. He relied on pre-prepared ingredients, exploited his staff, and cultivated a false image of authenticity. His signature dishes, the ones he boasted about on social media, were nothing more than reheated, pre-packaged meals, gussied up with a sprinkle of herbs and a hefty price tag. I learned about his suppliers, the shady characters who provided him with his pre-made ingredients. I learned about the high turnover rate among his staff, a clear indication of his poor management skills. I even learned about his personal life, his extravagant spending habits, his inflated ego. He was a walking cliché, a caricature of the arrogant young chef, convinced of his own genius, blind to his own flaws. I had everything I needed. The pieces were in place. The ingredients were assembled. Now, it was time to start cooking. My recipe for revenge was about to come to life. And Marco Rossi was about to get a taste of his own medicine. I had a pretty good picture of Marco now, built from whispers and half-truths gleaned from my network. It was enough to confirm my suspicions, but I needed hard evidence. Antoine's tip about the out-of-state supplier was my starting point. A little digging, a few well-placed calls to some old contacts in the food distribution business, and I had a name, Quality Cuisine Solutions. The name itself stank of pre-packaged mediocrity. I pulled up their website. It was all stock photos of smiling chefs and gleaming kitchens, the usual marketing fluff. But buried deep within the site, past the pages of testimonials and our story nonsense, I found their product catalog. And there it was. Page after page of pre-made sauces, pastas, soups, even desserts. All flash-frozen, vacuum-sealed, ready to be reheated and served. The descriptions were sickeningly saccharine, filled with buzzwords like authentic, artisanal, and handcrafted. It was a culinary graveyard, a mausoleum of flavor. And then I saw it. Marco's signature dish, the Nonna Amelia's secret recipe bolognese, right there in the catalog, next to a pre-made tiramisu and a frozen pesto. The same dish Marco boasted about, the one he claimed was based on his grandmother's secret recipe, handed down through generations. It was a lie, a blatant, shameless lie. He was buying it pre-made, reheating it, and charging exorbitant prices for it. The audacity. The sheer gall of it. I printed out the page, the image of Marco's secret recipe bolognese staring back at me, a testament to his deceit. This was it, the smoking gun, the proof I needed. I felt a surge of satisfaction, a sense of vindication. Marco's house of cards was about to come crashing down. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to know more about his operation, his staff, his weaknesses. Genevieve had mentioned a disgruntled sous chef. This, I suspected, was another potential crack in Marco's facade. I reached out to Genevieve again, asking for more information. The sous chef, she'd said talented but frustrated. She gave me a name, Isabella Marchetti. I found Isabella on LinkedIn. Her profile was impressive. Culinary school graduate, experience in several Michelin-starred restaurants, a clear passion for authentic Italian cuisine. It was obvious she was overqualified to be working under someone like Marco. I sent her a message, posing as a recruiter, offering a potential opportunity. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. A few days later, I received a reply. Isabella was cautious, understandably so, but she was also curious. She agreed to meet for coffee. We met at a quiet cafe, away from the prying eyes of the culinary world. I explained my situation, downplaying my connection to the industry, presenting myself as a concerned foodie, disturbed by the rumors surrounding Marco's restaurant. Isabella was hesitant at first. She was loyal to her team, despite her frustrations with Marco. But as I talked, as I shared my own experiences, my own passion for authentic Italian cuisine, she began to open up. She confirmed everything I'd heard, and more. Marco was a tyrant in the kitchen, micromanaging every detail, stifling creativity, and taking credit for the work of others. He was obsessed with appearances, with maintaining his carefully crafted image, while neglecting the heart and soul of the food. He doesn't care about the food, Isabella said, her voice laced with bitterness. He cares about the image, the Instagram posts, the celebrity endorsements. He's a fraud, Mr. Griffin. A complete and utter fraud. She told me about the pre-prepared ingredients, the cost-cutting measures, the corners Marco cut to maximize profits. She told me about the demoralized staff, the high turnover rate, the simmering resentment that permeated the kitchen. She told me about her own ambitions, her dreams of opening her own restaurant, a place where authentic Italian cuisine would be celebrated, not exploited. I listened, nodding sympathetically, my heart filled with a mixture of anger and admiration. Anger at Marco, for his deceit and his arrogance. Admiration for Isabella, for her talent and her integrity. She was the real deal. A true chef, trapped in a gilded cage, forced to serve reheated, prepackaged mediocrity. As I left the cafe, I knew I'd found my weak link. Isabella was the key. She was the one who could help me expose Marco, to bring his empire crashing down. She was the final ingredient in my recipe for revenge. And together, we would make sure Marco Rossi got exactly what he deserved. The plan, as it began to coalesce in my mind, was a multi-pronged attack, a carefully orchestrated symphony of chaos designed to expose Marco's fraudulent practices and destroy his chances at the Golden Ladle Awards. It wouldn't be a single dramatic blow, but a series of smaller, more insidious strikes, each one chipping away at his credibility, eroding his reputation, until his carefully constructed empire crumbled into dust. First, the supplier, Quality Cuisine Solutions. I needed to make sure the judges and the public knew about Marco's reliance on pre-prepared ingredients. I couldn't just accuse him outright. That would be too easy to dismiss, too easy to deny. I needed something more subtle. Something that would raise questions, plant seeds of doubt, and ultimately lead to his downfall. I contacted a food blogger I knew, a young woman named Chloe, who had a reputation for exposing culinary shenanigans. I'd met her a few times at industry events, and I knew she had a nose for a good story. I sent her an anonymous tip, a brief email detailing Marco's relationship with Quality Cuisine Solutions. I didn't accuse him directly, just suggested she look into his sourcing practices. Chloe, I knew, wouldn't be able to resist a juicy scoop like this. Next, the judges. I needed to influence their perception of Marco, to subtly steer them away from his restaurant. I couldn't bribe them, of course. That was too risky, too obvious. I needed something more, indirect. I reached out to a few old colleagues, respected chefs who had served as judges for the Golden Ladle Awards in the past. I casually mentioned Marco's name, expressing some mild reservations about his authenticity, hinting at rumors of pre-prepared ingredients. I didn't accuse him directly, just planted a few seeds of doubt. These were experienced chefs with discerning palates. They would notice the lack of depth in Marco's food, the subtle signs of pre-packaged mediocrity, and my carefully planted doubts would only amplify their suspicions. Then there was Isabella. She was the key to disrupting Marco's operation from the inside. I didn't want to ask her to do anything illegal, anything that would jeopardize her career. But I knew she was frustrated, eager to escape Marco's oppressive regime. I suggested a few minor disruptions. Nothing major, just enough to throw Marco off his game, to create a little chaos in his kitchen. A misplaced order here, a delayed delivery there. Small things, seemingly insignificant on their own, but cumulatively, they would create a sense of unease, a feeling of things spiraling out of control. Finally, the night of the awards. This was where everything would come together, the culmination of my plan, the final act of my revenge. I needed to be there, not as a participant, but as an observer. A silent witness to Marco's downfall. I wouldn't gloat, I wouldn't confront him. I would simply watch as his carefully crafted empire crumbled around him, as his reputation was tarnished, as his dreams of culinary glory turned to ashes. It was a complex plan, with multiple moving parts. There was a risk, of course, that it could all backfire, but the more I thought about it, the more confident I became. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about justice. It was about upholding the standards of my profession. It was about exposing a fraud and restoring integrity to the culinary world, and I, Edward Griffin, was the man who was going to do it. I needed help. This plan, as satisfying as it was to concoct, was too intricate for one man to pull off. I needed people I could trust, people who understood the nuances of the culinary world, people who shared my passion for authentic cuisine and my disgust for Marco's charade. Antoine, my former sous chef, was the obvious first choice. He was sharp, resourceful, and, thankfully, still owed me a few favors from our Paris days. I called him up, explaining the situation, laying out my plan in detail. He listened intently, occasionally interjecting with a shrewd observation or a helpful suggestion. By the time I'd finished, he was on board. "Henri, my friend," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of amusement and admiration. "You've always been a master of the subtle art of culinary persuasion. Consider me your sous chef once again." Antoine's catering business gave him access to a network of suppliers, distributors, and even kitchen staff. He could be my eyes and ears on the ground, subtly manipulating events behind the scenes. He agreed to, quote, accidentally misdirect a crucial ingredient delivery for Marco's competition entry, ensuring a slight but noticeable delay. He also promised to spread the word amongst his contacts about Marco's reliance on pre-prepared ingredients, further fueling the rumors and suspicions. Next, I contacted Genevieve. She was a tough nut to crack, fiercely independent and skeptical of anyone who tried to influence her judgment. But I knew she had a strong sense of justice, a deep-seated loathing for culinary dishonesty. I appealed to her sense of fairness, her commitment to exposing the truth. "Genevieve, darling," I said, "this isn't just about Marco. It's about the integrity of our profession. It's about protecting the public from being deceived by charlatans and pretenders." She didn't commit immediately. She needed time to think, to consider the implications. But I could sense her interest, the flicker of righteous indignation in her voice. A few days later, she called me back. "Henri," she said, "I'm in. This Marco needs to be exposed. He's a disgrace to our profession." She agreed to attend the Golden Ladle Awards, to observe Marco's performance with a critical eye, and to write a scathing review, exposing his flaws and his deceit. She also promised to discreetly share her concerns with the other judges, further undermining Marco's chances of winning. I also reached out to a couple of other food critics I knew and trusted, individuals with impeccable reputations and a commitment to culinary excellence. I shared my concerns about Marco, emphasizing the importance of upholding the standards of the profession. They were initially hesitant, reluctant to get involved in what could be perceived as a personal vendetta. But I assured them that this was about more than just revenge. It was about protecting the integrity of the culinary world, about exposing a fraud, and ensuring that true talent and dedication were recognized and rewarded. Eventually, they agreed to join my cause, to lend their voices to the chorus of dissent that was building against Marco. With my team assembled, I felt a surge of confidence. This wasn't just a solitary act of revenge anymore. It was a collective effort, a united front against culinary dishonesty. We were a small but determined band of culinary vigilantes, fighting for justice, for authenticity, for the soul of our profession. And we wouldn't rest until Marco Rossi had been exposed, until his reign of culinary deception had come to an end. The plan was in motion. It was a delicate operation, a carefully constructed clockwork mechanism with multiple gears and levers, all working in concert to achieve a single, devastating outcome. I had to be careful, precise, ensuring that each piece fell into place at exactly the right moment. One wrong move, one misstep, and the whole thing could collapse. My first target was Chloe, the food blogger. I'd chosen her carefully. She had a reputation for being fearless, for exposing culinary hypocrisy wherever she found it. She had a large following, a loyal audience who hung on her every word. And she had a particular disdain for chefs who cut corners, who prioritized profit over quality. Marco, with his prepackaged, quote, authentic Italian cuisine, was the perfect target for her brand of culinary justice. I sent her an anonymous email, a brief message with a link to the Quality Cuisine Solutions product catalog, highlighting the page featuring Marco's Nonna Amelia's secret recipe bolognese. I didn't accuse him directly, just suggested she look into the similarities between Marco's signature dish and the pre-made version offered by Quality Cuisine Solutions. I knew Chloe wouldn't be able to resist a story like this. It was too juicy, too scandalous, too perfectly aligned with her crusade against culinary fakery. Then, I turned my attention to the judges. This was a more delicate operation, requiring a subtler approach. I couldn't just tell them Marco was a fraud. They wouldn't believe me. They'd dismiss it as the ramblings of a disgruntled old-timer. I needed to plant the seeds of doubt, to subtly influence their perception of Marco and his restaurant. I started by contacting Pierre, a former colleague who had served on the Golden Ladle Awards judging panel in the past. Pierre and I had worked together years ago, back in my Paris days. He was a respected chef, a man of impeccable integrity and discerning taste. I called him up, feigning casual conversation, mentioning that I'd heard some whispers about Marco's restaurant, some rumors of cost-cutting measures and pre-prepared ingredients. I didn't accuse Marco directly, just expressed some mild concern about his authenticity. "Just between us, Pierre," I said, "have you noticed anything unusual about Marco's food? A certain lack of depth, perhaps?" Pierre, bless his gossipy soul, took the bait. He'd been to Marco's a few times, he admitted, and while the food was technically proficient, it lacked something. "It's efficient," he said, searching for the right word, "like it's been optimized for mass production. There's no soul, no heart." I continued to work my network, contacting other former colleagues and food critics who had served as judges for the Golden Ladle Awards. I repeated the same tactic, expressing mild concerns, hinting at rumors, planting seeds of doubt. I didn't need to convince them that Marco was a fraud. I just needed to make them question his authenticity, to make them look at his food with a more critical eye. And I knew, deep down, that once they started looking, they would find what I'd found. They would see the cracks in the facade, the hollowness beneath the surface. The final piece of the puzzle was the competition itself. I needed to ensure that Marco's performance on the night of the awards was less than stellar. I contacted Antoine, outlining the next phase of the plan. He had already arranged for a slight delay in the delivery of a crucial ingredient for Marco's competition entry. Now he would orchestrate a few more minor disruptions. A misplaced order here, a malfunctioning piece of equipment there. Nothing major. Just enough to create a sense of unease, to throw Marco off his game. The stage was set. The pieces were in place. The clockwork mechanism was ticking, inexorably moving towards the predetermined outcome. Marco Rossi, the arrogant young pretender, was about to get a taste of his own medicine. He was about to learn a very valuable lesson. Never underestimate the wisdom and experience of those who came before you, and never, ever, insult a Michelin-starred chef. The night of the Golden Ladle Awards arrived, thick with anticipation and the aroma of ambition. I wasn't competing, of course, but I felt a nervous energy humming beneath my skin. I'd secured a table in a quiet corner of the ballroom, a vantage point that offered a clear view of the action without drawing attention to myself. I watched as Marco, resplendent in his pristine white chef's coat, flitted about the room, shaking hands, accepting congratulations in advance, radiating an aura of confidence that bordered on arrogance. He had no idea what was coming. The competition was structured as a live cooking demonstration. Each chef had a designated station where they prepared their signature dish, while a panel of judges, along with the assembled guests, observed their every move. Marco was scheduled to be the last to present, the grand finale of the evening. I watched as the other chefs took their turns, some nervous, some confident, all showcasing their culinary skills with varying degrees of success. The air crackled with the sizzle of frying pans, the clatter of pots and pans, the hushed murmurs of the crowd. Then, it was Marco's turn. He strode to his station, a smug smile plastered across his face, basking in the spotlight. He began his presentation, his voice smooth and confident, extolling the virtues of his Nonna Emilia's secret recipe, bolognese. He described the painstaking process, the careful selection of ingredients, the generations-old techniques that had been passed down through his family. It was all a lie, of course, a carefully crafted performance designed to deceive the judges and impress the crowd. Just as Marco began to assemble his dish, a commotion erupted near the entrance to the ballroom. Chloe, the food blogger, had arrived. She wasn't on the official guest list, but she'd managed to sneak in, her phone held aloft, live streaming the event to her followers. She marched straight towards Marco's station, her voice ringing out above the din of the crowd. Quote, "Chef Rossi," she called out, "can you tell us a little more about the sourcing of your ingredients, specifically your bolognese sauce?" Marco, caught off guard, stammered a reply. My bolognese is made with the finest ingredients, sourced locally." Chloe cut him off, holding up a printout of the Quality Cuisine Solutions product catalog. "Is that so, Chef Rossi? Because this catalog seems to suggest otherwise." In fact, it appears your Nonna Emilia's secret recipe is nothing more than a reheated, pre-packaged product purchased from a wholesale supplier. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Marco's face turned a shade of crimson that clashed violently with his white chef's coat. He sputtered, trying to deny the accusations, but Chloe was relentless. She held up the catalog, pointing to the picture of the pre-made bolognese, the same dish Marco was supposedly preparing from scratch. "Care to explain this, Chef Rossi?" she demanded. Marco, flustered and exposed, could barely string a coherent sentence together. He tried to deflect, to blame his suppliers, to claim it was all a misunderstanding. But the damage was done. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they were rapidly taking root in the minds of the judges and the assembled guests. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Antoine's plan was unfolding with clockwork precision. A series of minor disasters, seemingly unrelated, began to plague Marco's station. The oven temperature fluctuated wildly, ruining the carefully timed cooking of his pasta. A crucial ingredient, the very one Antoine had misdirected, was nowhere to be found. And then, the final blow. The power to Marco's station flickered, then died completely, plunging his cooking area into darkness. Marco, already reeling from Chloe's exposé, was now completely undone. He stood there, amidst the darkened chaos of his station, his face a mask of disbelief and despair. The carefully constructed facade of culinary genius had crumbled, revealing the incompetent, dishonest charlatan beneath. The judges, their faces a mixture of disgust and amusement, watched in silence as Marco's dreams of culinary glory went up in smoke, quite literally. The crowd, initially stunned into silence, now erupted in a cacophony of whispers and laughter. Marco's carefully orchestrated performance had become a farce, a comedic tragedy of his own making. He'd been exposed, humiliated, and utterly defeated. And I, Edward Griffin, watched from my quiet corner, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips. The main course had been served. And it was a dish, best served cold. The whispers and laughter rippled through the ballroom, a tidal wave of mockery washing over Marco. He stood there, frozen in the spotlight, his face a ghastly white under the harsh glare of the stage lights. The carefully cultivated image of the confident, charismatic young chef had evaporated, leaving behind a shell of a man, stripped bare of his pretensions. His shoulders slumped, his eyes darted nervously around the room, searching for an escape, a way out of this public humiliation. But there was none. He was trapped, caught in the web of his own lies. The judges, initially stunned into silence, now began to murmur amongst themselves, their expressions ranging from amusement to disgust. They'd been fooled, taken in by Marco's carefully crafted performance. They'd believed his story about Nana Emilia's secret recipe. They'd admired his supposed culinary skills. They'd even considered him a frontrunner for the coveted Golden Ladle Award. Now they saw him for what he was, a fraud, a charlatan, a pretender to the throne of culinary excellence. The head judge, a stern-faced woman with a reputation for unwavering integrity, rose from her seat and approached Marco's darkened station. "Chef Rossi," she said, her voice amplified by the microphone, "I'm afraid your performance this evening has been disappointing. The judges have witnessed firsthand your unconventional sourcing practices and your unfortunate series of kitchen mishaps. Under these circumstances, we have no choice but to disqualify you from the competition." Marco's face crumpled. He opened his mouth to speak, to protest, to offer some kind of explanation, but no words came out. He just stood there, mute and defeated, the weight of his public humiliation crushing him like a ton of bricks. The head judge turned to the audience, her voice regaining its composure. Quote, "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "due to Chef Rossi's unforeseen circumstances, we will be moving directly to the announcement of the Golden Ladle Award winner." A ripple of anticipation ran through the crowd. The tension in the room, thick and palpable just moments before, now dissipated, replaced by a sense of collective relief. The charade was over. The fraud had been exposed. And now the real chefs, the ones who had earned their place through hard work and dedication, could finally be recognized. The head judge opened the sealed envelope containing the name of the winner. She paused for dramatic effect, then announced, her voice clear and resonant, "The Golden Ladle Award for Best New Restaurant goes to Chef Isabella Marchetti." A roar of applause erupted from the audience. Isabella, who had been standing quietly near the back of the room, stepped forward, her face beaming with surprise and delight. She accepted the award with grace and humility, thanking the judges, her team, and everyone who had supported her. It was a moment of pure triumph, a victory not just for Isabella, but for authenticity, for integrity, for the true spirit of culinary excellence. Marco, meanwhile, slunk away from his darkened station, a ghost in his own pristine white chef's coat. He slipped out of the ballroom unnoticed, disappearing into the night, his dreams of culinary glory shattered, his reputation in ruins. He'd lost everything. The competition, the award, the respect of his peers, the trust of his patrons. He'd been exposed as a fraud, a charlatan, a pretender, and he had no one to blame but himself. I watched as he disappeared, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips. The bitter taste of defeat was his to savor now, and I, Edward Griffin, had served it to him, one carefully planned ingredient at a time. News travels fast in the culinary world, especially bad news. Marco's spectacular meltdown at the Golden Ladle Awards became the talk of the town, or rather, the talk of every kitchen, every restaurant, every food blog, and every online forum dedicated to the art of cooking. It spread like wildfire, fueled by the schadenfreude of rival chefs, the righteous indignation of food critics, and the gleeful gossip of the general public. Chloe's live stream of the event went viral, viewed and shared thousands of times. The image of Marco, flustered and exposed, standing amidst the darkened chaos of his cooking station, became a meme, a symbol of culinary hubris, and the inevitable downfall of those who prioritize image over substance. The comments sections were brutal, filled with mockery, derision, and the occasional expression of genuine outrage. Marco's carefully crafted online persona, the image of the confident, charismatic young chef, was shattered beyond repair. The mainstream media picked up the story, eager to capitalize on the drama. Newspapers and magazines ran articles with headlines like "Chef's Secret Recipe Exposed as Pre-Packaged Fraud," and "From Golden Ladle Hopeful to Culinary Disgrace." Marco's face, once plastered across food magazines and lifestyle blogs, now adorned the pages of tabloids and gossip websites, alongside stories of celebrity scandals and political intrigue. The fallout was swift and merciless. Reservations at Marco's plummeted. Patrons, once eager to sample his authentic Italian cuisine, now shunned the restaurant, repulsed by the thought of eating reheated, pre-packaged meals masquerading as culinary masterpieces. The once bustling dining room became eerily quiet, the tables empty, the atmosphere thick with the stench of failure. Marco's suppliers, sensing the impending doom, quickly distanced themselves. Quality Cuisine Solutions, eager to protect their own reputation, issued a statement claiming they had no knowledge of Marco's deceptive practices, conveniently omitting the fact that they had been supplying him with pre-made dishes for months. Other suppliers followed suit, cutting ties with Marco, unwilling to be associated with his tarnished name. Marco's staff, already demoralized and underpaid, began to desert the sinking ship. The sous chef, Isabella, having been vindicated by her Golden Ladle Award win, had already secured a position at a prestigious restaurant, eager to put the Marco Rossi debacle behind her. Other staff members followed suit, finding new jobs, leaving Marco to face the mounting crisis alone. The financial strain became unbearable. With dwindling customers, mounting debts, and a reputation in tatters, Marco was forced to close his restaurant. The once promising Marco's became another casualty of the cutthroat culinary world, a cautionary tale of ambition gone awry, a testament to the dangers of prioritizing image over substance. Marco himself became a recluse, shunned by the culinary community, ridiculed by the public. He'd lost everything: his restaurant, his reputation, his livelihood, his dreams. He was a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones in kitchens across the city. He was a living example of what happens when arrogance and deceit collide with the unforgiving realities of the culinary world. He had flown too close to the sun, and his wings, made of flimsy pretense and pre-packaged mediocrity, had melted away, sending him plummeting back to earth, a broken, disgraced figure. He had tasted the bitter tang of defeat, a dish he had, in his arrogance, served to himself. I didn't gloat, I didn't celebrate, I didn't dance in the streets. My satisfaction was a quieter thing, a deep, slow burn of contentment that warmed me from the inside out. I'd watched Marco's downfall from a distance, observing his descent with a detached, almost clinical fascination. It wasn't about joy, exactly. It was more about balance, restoring the natural order of things, righting a wrong. I'd been back in my kitchen, tending to my herb garden, the scent of rosemary and thyme filling the air, a stark contrast to the acrid stench of burnt ambition that clung to Marco's now empty restaurant. The world, it seemed, had a way of correcting itself. Arrogance, like a weed, could flourish for a while, choking out the genuine, the authentic, the true, but eventually it would be uprooted, exposed to the sunlight, and wither away. I'd rediscovered my joy of cooking. The simple act of chopping vegetables, the sizzle of garlic in olive oil, the comforting aroma of simmering sauces. It all brought a sense of peace, a connection to something deeper, something beyond the petty insults and fleeting triumphs of the culinary world. Marco's words, once so sharp and stinging, now felt insignificant. Like the buzzing of a fly, an annoyance easily swatted away. I thought about my Michelin star, the one I'd earned through years of hard work and dedication. It wasn't just a symbol of achievement. It was a testament to the values I held dear: integrity, authenticity, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. Marco, in his arrogance, had tried to diminish that, to reduce my life's work to a meaningless relic. He'd tried to invalidate my experience, my knowledge, my passion. He'd failed. The satisfaction I felt wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about vindication. It was about upholding the standards of my profession, about protecting the sanctity of the culinary arts from charlatans and pretenders. Marco's downfall wasn't just a personal victory. It was a victory for everyone who believed in the power of food, in the magic of transforming simple ingredients into something extraordinary. It was a victory for the countless chefs who toiled in kitchens across the world, dedicating their lives to the pursuit of culinary excellence. I looked out at my herb garden, at the vibrant green leaves, bathed in the warm afternoon sun. The world felt right again. Balance had been restored. Justice had been served. And I, Edward Griffin, could finally enjoy my retirement, free from the bitter taste of Marco's insult, knowing that I'd not only avenged myself, but also upheld the integrity of the profession I loved. The dish of revenge, carefully prepared and meticulously served, had been consumed, and it was, indeed, a dish best served cold. Spring had arrived, chasing away the last vestiges of winter's chill. The air was soft, fragrant with the promise of new growth. My herb garden, once a battlefield of simmering resentment, was now a haven of tranquility. The rosemary bushes, heavy with fragrant needles, hummed with the drowsy buzz of bees. The thyme, a carpet of vibrant green, released its pungent aroma with every gentle breeze. Even the basil, a late bloomer, was showing signs of life, tiny green shoots pushing their way through the dark soil. I knelt by the raised bed, gently pinching off a dead leaf from a sage plant. The soil, warm and crumbly beneath my fingertips, felt like a familiar friend. It was good to be back in my garden, reconnecting with the simple pleasures of tending to my herbs, nurturing them, watching them grow. For a while, after the Golden Ladle Awards, the bitterness had lingered. Marco's words, his dismissive arrogance, had left a stain on my soul, tainting the joy I'd once found in cooking. But time, like a gentle rain, had washed away the residue of resentment, leaving behind a sense of quiet satisfaction. I'd started cooking again, not out of obligation, not out of a need to prove anything, but simply for the pure pleasure of it. I experimented with new recipes, revisited old favorites, rediscovering the familiar rhythms of the kitchen, the comforting clatter of pots and pans, the sizzle of garlic in olive oil, the heady aroma of simmering sauces. It wasn't about Michelin stars anymore. It wasn't about accolades or recognition. It was about the food itself, the simple act of creating something delicious, something that brought joy to others, something that nourished both body and soul. I'd even started teaching a small cooking class at the local community center, a group of enthusiastic amateurs, eager to learn the secrets of Italian cuisine. They were a far cry from the cutthroat world of professional kitchens, but their enthusiasm was infectious, their passion for food, a refreshing reminder of why I dedicated my life to this craft. I thought about Marco, about his spectacular downfall, his public humiliation. The memory brought a faint smile to my lips. It wasn't a smile of triumph, not exactly. It was more a smile of amusement, a quiet chuckle at the irony of it all. He'd been so consumed by his ambition, so blinded by his arrogance, that he'd failed to see the obvious. He'd built his empire on a foundation of lies, and it had crumbled beneath him, taking him down with it. I'd learned a valuable lesson from the whole experience. A lesson about the fleeting nature of fame, the importance of integrity, and the enduring power of authenticity. Marco had chased the spotlight, the accolades, the validation of the culinary world. He'd craved recognition, respect, and admiration, but he'd sought them in the wrong places, through shortcuts and deception. He'd forgotten the most important ingredient of all, passion, the genuine, unadulterated love of food, the joy of creating something beautiful and delicious, something that nourishes not just the body, but the soul. I closed my eyes, inhaling the fragrant air of my garden, the scent of rosemary and thyme mingling with the sweet perfume of the blossoming roses. The sun, warm on my face, felt like a gentle caress. I was content. I was at peace. I was home. And in that moment, surrounded by the simple beauty of my garden, I realized that true satisfaction wasn't about revenge or recognition or even Michelin stars. It was about finding joy in the everyday moments, in the simple pleasures of life, in the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. It was about the sweet taste of vindication, the knowledge that integrity and authenticity, in the end, would always prevail. I looked up from my tomato plants, a ripe red beauty warming in my hand. I wiped a smudge of dirt on my apron, the same apron that had hung, neglected, for so long. I wear it now, not as a reminder of past glories, but as a symbol of the simple joy I find in creating something good, something honest. I looked straight ahead, as if someone were there, listening to my story. Never underestimate the wisdom and experience of those who came before you, I said. We might be retired, but that doesn't mean we're out of the game. We've seen a thing or two, learned a lesson or three. We know how the world works, how to play the long game, how to season a dish just right, and how to serve a dish best served cold. I chuckled softly, the memory of Marco's downfall still bringing a flicker of amusement. And remember, I added, a wink in my eye, subscribing to Retirement Stories is the best way to ensure you never miss a tale of righteous revenge. You never know when an old dog might have a few new tricks up his sleeve.